about this space. This is our central courtyard.
Let's listen. Let's listen, everybody. Thank you.
So this is our central courtyard. This is the heart of the estate. And you know, these indoor-outdoor spaces are very popular in a lot of places around the world. So we are a museum of Islamic art. But that term Islamic art is really something that was just coined by Western art historians to describe anything that comes from a mostly Islamic country. But we know and understand that a lot of Islamic countries have great diversity in terms of different cultures, different religions, and what is considered Islamic art is not always religious. It doesn't have to come from a religious setting. A lot of these places that Islam exists in and is the dominant religion today also have a long pre-Islamic history, so a lot of that visual culture gets incorporated into what is considered Islamic art. So this term is very imperfect, and in our presentations of the museum we try to sort of contextualize that and talk about the nuances. In this space, all of the tiles that you're looking at in here are from Iran. They're from the visit that Doris Duke took to Iran in 1937, visited Esfahan. So the playhouse that you were just in, that was inspired by her visit to Esfahan, where she took pictures and 8mm film. These columns right here were also inspired by a site she visited in Esfahan known as the Ali Qapu Palace. In the major square known as the Maidan-e-Shah or Naqsh-e-Jahan, which is a square that was built by the Safavid dynasty to be their capital in Esfahan. So the Ali Qapu Palace, and be careful leaning on these two. These are really old, and these mirrored glass pieces will fall out. Like everything in this museum is very old, and having a museum at the edge of the ocean is also really not the best idea, but you know, it is. So she visited Ali Qapu Palace, took pictures of these mirrored columns there, and the architecture of the courtyard as well, and then had her architects recreate these. So these mirrored columns are actually made in Chicago, but they were made to look like the ones that came from Iran. All of the tiles in here are from Iran. They're original from Iran. The oldest ones back here, these are from the 14th century. So the oldest tiles we have in this courtyard. The ones on the east and west wall here are from the 17th century, from the Safavid period. This large blue mosaic panel, this was a commission. So, like I mentioned when we first came in, Doris Duke commissioned artists from around the world to create a lot of the elements that we have in the museum. So when she visited Esfahan in 1937, she visited that major square. One of the architectural sites there is known as the King's Mosque, or the Masjid al-Shah. And at the entrance of that mosque, there's two of these giant panels at the entrance portal. This is a replica of one of the sides, but it was made by artists in Esfahan who had recently renovated that mosque, which is a 16th century mosque. But it had been renovated in 1937. Doris Duke's timing was excellent to be there at the same time this was happening and to commission these artists to create this replica of this panel, and also a series of other tiles, the tiles that are on the outside of the playhouse that you were just in. Some of the tiles and the archways up here, these were also made by these artists at the same time. This large mosaic panel here, this is about 17,000 pieces of individual hand-cut tile that have been puzzle pieced together. And so what they do is they create the pattern, they cut the tiles, they piece the tiles together, laid face down, mortar everything, right? So put the pattern together. This all happened in Iran, and then they broke off large chunks of it to be shipped here and installed. So if you look closely, you can see some of the break lines still of where they broke this piece to ship it here. It's an exact replica of what you would find at the masjid or the mosque, except the very top. You see that square at the very top? That sort of looks like a QR code. That's actually Kufic calligraphy written in Farsi, and it's a special message that the artist included for Doris Duke. So it says Mubarakbad, which literally means like congratulations or wishing her luck on this new endeavor that she was undertaking in building this estate. Some of these tiles, the ones that are up here actually, these tile panels, they're from Esfahan in Iran as well, but they actually come from churches in Esfahan, Armenian churches that were built in the 17th century. So again, we talk about Islamic art, but Islamic art is not always Muslim. right? And that's sort of a difficult thing to try to grapple with for a lot of people, but we're going to bring that up over and over again because a lot of what we have tiles from Spain that come from churches. And southern Spain was an Islamic country for 700 years, so there's a lot of mixed symbolism, iconography that comes out of these places. Anyone have any questions in here?
So the Coptic church is the Islamic art, the Egypt one, the Egypt who lived in there.
Oh, the Coptic church?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean some of that is considered Islamic art as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean things that come out of India, especially India. The Mughals were an Islamic dynasty in India, but we have statues that are Hindu statues that are not Muslim at all, but to Westerners they could be considered Islamic art. It's just a very imperfect term.
So from Armenia, what was the timeline and kind of the conditions
So there were-
in which they came here, given?
Well, they were Armenian churches in Iran, in Esfahan. Yeah, those two tiles at the top, the panels at the top. So they were found or they came originally from a church, but it was in Iran.
So So I have a question.
Yes.
At that time, why were the artisans from Iran willing to, in a way, sell their culture, commodify their culture to this American woman here? Was it really for the money, or did they see it as a way to export and express their culture?
I think it's probably a bit of both. If someone went, and Iranians in general, a lot of people are very generous with their culture. So they'll freely share pieces of their culture. When people come from outside of the country, guests are very important people. So often you'll be gifted things. But someone in this situation, Doris Duke, making this major commission, was a part of so what was happening in Iran in 1937 is they were really renovating a lot of these historic sites. The king of Iran at that time, Reza Shah, was undertaking this effort to revitalize traditional Iranian art and craft work, really because they were dealing with British colonialism, French colonialism at that time, and Reza Shah wanted to reassert sort of Iranian and Persian identity. So I think Doris Duke commissioning that sort of helped that movement. And same thing when she was in India. So the original inspiration of the estate here was when she visited India on a honeymoon trip before she even came to Hawaii and visited the Taj Mahal, the Red Fort, other Mughal architectural sites, and commissioned artists in India to recreate a bedroom and bathroom suite made out of marble for her. And again, at that time, this is 1935, Gandhi was spearheading this effort to revitalize traditional Indian craft work as well. So Doris Duke making this major commission actually helped that movement. Now, that wasn't her intention, it's just her timing was really good. But in a lot of these places, like the ceiling and the entryway from Morocco, if you went to the artists and you commissioned them, obviously it helps them feed their families, but they also love sharing their culture and exporting pieces of their culture. Now, we have other situations. So when you commission an artist, that's a very ethical trade. But there's other situations where tiles, other pieces of art, and this is not specific to Shangrila, it's really any museum around the world. Items that were taken, sold, exchanged hands, were bought from art dealers. There's a little bit more of ethical questions around those things in terms of collecting practices, display practices. And we do have some examples of that here. We have tiles that come from shrines in Iran that were removed from these shrines during this era of colonialism. Basically, this is the story of colonialism. They were removed from these shrines, sometimes by foreigners, but oftentimes sold by Iranians or other people in these areas. And then, they exchanged hands and ended up in a place like this in a museum, right? So there's more discussion and nuance and conversation, opportunities for that type of discussion, I think, around collection items that came outside of commissions. I think when you commission an artist, it's a lot more, it's very open what's happening here.
it's very unusual. The Islamic art have the figures. So why does the
So that's also another sort of misconception about religious Islamic art. So, we're taught that there are no figural depictions, animals or people in religious art, but it depends when and where you're talking about. It depends what sect of Islam you're talking about. Like tiles that come from Iran, the Shia Muslims are a lot more likely to have figural images in religious art. And also, pre-Islamic Iranian culture has a lot of mythology and animals and things, and that get incorporated. So actually, this mosque, the Masjid al-Shah, we have tiles which we'll go in and see in the dining room. There's replicas of tiles from inside that mosque, and there's animals on it. So that's sort of a misconception that you never see figural images in Islamic art. It really, I mean, you're talking 1,400 years of history, and such a diversity in terms of geography and regional diversity. So a lot of, there's, very little things that are just applied across the board. All right, you guys ready to go see more? You have questions?
What are some other common misconceptions?
Well, one, that all Islamic art is religious, that all Islamic art is Muslim. A lot of the countries, like I stated, have long pre-Islamic history that have so much diversity within them. So it's almost like calling any American artist a Christian artist. It's like just not completely accurate. But the biggest sort of misconception is that figural images in Islamic art are forbidden. In some areas and some religious sects, that's definitely true, but that's not universal across the board. There's probably more that I can't think of right now, but hopefully those questions are fun. Hey, you guys want to come take a look at